Okay, do the Cowboys need to invest more at running back? Just a couple of days after PFF called the Cowboys running back room the worst running back room in all of the NFL. Saquon Barkley's talking about the Cowboys over the weekend. Let's do this.
The only thing else I got to say is, how about them Cowboys? Yeah!
All right, welcome in. Are you scared of Saquon Barkley, Cowboys fans? Are you envious that their front office adds superstar players to their roster? Or do you think the Eagles just kind of got lucky and dodged a bullet after over-investing at running back with an injury-prone guy? He runs them all the way to the Super Bowl with some of the most explosive runs we've seen in regular season and postseason history. No doubt in my mind, New Bear, the Eagles do not win the Super Bowl last year without Saquon Barkley. Similar things happen if the Cowboys can get a superstar at the position? How the hell you doing, buddy?
What a difference maker that young man is. He's one of the rare Penn State guys that isn't just a run fast, jump high, and then I don't know, like pick your favorite tight end who catches balls but couldn't block himself in a room full of mirrors. Saquon's one of the easier Penn State guys to root for.
He is, man. Total 10 out of 10. When he was with the Giants, you could really appreciate it because they weren't that good around him. And I think that's maybe the starting point of this conversation is, hey, he wasn't good with the Giants. What would he solve with the Cowboys? Could he have had that similar impact? But here he is. Here's why we're talking about it over the weekend. Never heard a word from the Commanders or Dallas. Barkley told someone known as Janky Rondo at a celebrity softball game, I believe. And he says, that's why it's BTA when I see them, belt to ass. I don't know. I do think this is kind of like Christian McCaffrey, where he had immediate success in San Francisco. Barkley had immediate success. But if you had to ask me, what do I think is going to happen this year? It's Saquon Barkley is going to get hurt, and they're going to take an $18 million hit to their salary cap for a player who's not going to be around very much just because of how much he touched the ball last year, buddy.
Yeah, and that's something that you see. We talk about the variance, and then the guys who you talk about 400 touches. I mean, it's rare air. Like that's why what LaDainian and rare guys like him, Emmitt Smith, of course, right at the top of that list when you're talking about volume and production for years. And there's an argument to be made for that. I think the Philly does a real good job too of managing and also spreading that around. And when you talk about all the different guys who can take pressure off of him, if there's a week where his hammy's grabbing, they can sit him down and still be really explosive. I think that's why this is such a relevant conversation for the Cowboys, because we're talking about this training camp battle royale, and it's really not clear who they even want to be RB1.
Yeah, they don't have good options. You can hope Jaden Blue can be the guy and have ball security enough to really be a weapon in the passing game and the running game. But that would be a surprise if he could be a 20 carry guy. You're probably looking at best case scenario 12 to 15 touch guy. And then Sanders has made a career out of getting the little things wrong. And Javonte Williams, for his pass protection, just doesn't have enough juice, I think, to get over 4 yards per attempt anymore in his career. So, the Cowboys made significant mistakes over a sustained period of time. I mean, it even started with DeMarco Murray. They didn't give him the ball enough until his fourth year, and then they let him go, okay? Then they overdraft Zeke, overpay Zeke, even as he is showing signs of wear and tear and age very early on in his career. They overpaid him. Then they bring him back. They did the same thing they did with Murray to Tony Pollard. Like, this team has made massive running back mistakes on their three most recent good running backs, either how they managed them, how they used them early in their career, or ultimately how they compensated them. I wonder if this is an overcorrection back to, wow, we've been screwing up for the last 10 years, over-investing in running back. They keep getting hurt. They're not much better than the backups. And if that's what they've done, I think that's an overcorrection. The trap with positional value is when the absolute contenders think they can get away with jobber players at big time spots. You need to be good at every single position in order to win in today's NFL, especially in this NFC, if you're trying to get it done with a quarterback like Dak Prescott, New Bear.
I do think you need to put some respect on young Zeke's name. You talk about it.
Would you have taken him fourth, or would you have taken Jalen Ramsey?
I mean, Saquon was 2, though, right? I mean, Baker Mayfield goes 1. Sandwiched around him was Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold. You could argue that Saquon should have went 1 in his draft. And there was a time, a few years before that where he would have, and certainly generation before.
The only time you should take a running back, in my opinion, like that is when every other position you have is locked down. Like he kind of proved it with the Giants. What was Saquon ultimately able to do besides take some pressure off of Daniel Jones so they could pretend he was good for a couple of years?
Saquon's rookie year was historic. You're talking about 1,300 yards, 5 yards a carry, 90 catches. He came in and he delivered. And
Washington got a historic rookie year from quarterback that put them in the NFC title game, out of the cellar to the NFC title game. Saquon's historic rookie year got them.
So what you're talking about is exactly what happened to Saquon, and what the Eagles did is the whole rest of the roster's ready. This is a guy that's going to take you over the top. Exactly what the Ravens are hoping is going to happen, and for all intents and purposes should have happened with Derrick Henry next to Lamar, right? Because you're talking about having all those other pieces in place, and this is the one that takes you to the promised land. And when you look back, Miles Sanders becomes a really interesting part of this conversation, because his last year with the Eagles was really freaking good. They just didn't want to pay him the way that they paid Saquon because he's not that guy, Penn State allegiance aside. When you start talking about how this thing shakes out, I can't stop thinking about the impetus, the genesis, the jump off point for this whole conversation for me was that, is the bell cow back? And when you look at the top teams and their expectation, playoffs, Super Bowl, we're talking about Saquon, we're talking about Derrick Henry, we're also talking about Josh Jacobs, we're talking about guys like Jonathan Taylor, Bijan Robinson, we're talking about everybody at the top of this list and what they're investing in that backfield, how they're getting that money. And what it comes back around to for me with the Cowboys is that they spent $3 million on Javonte Williams coming off of an injury. They spent $1.337 on Miles Sanders coming off 2 years of injury. And they didn't want to spend 2.5 is what Houston got Nick Chubb for. So when we're talking about the Cowboys, who love to sign hurt guys, love to draft hurt guys, right? And love to just bet on guys and their measurables, also production, even going back to college, like we talked about previously with Kenneth Murray coming out of Oklahoma all these years and all these teams later on Sunday. The Nick Chubb one is really interesting to me because you could argue that Mixon and Chubb are going to do some work down there in Houston.
Man, Nick Chubb is one of the most dynamic players I've ever seen at a football field. Like, I can't imagine they would prefer to have a Javonte Williams. I think that signing is about pass protection because they know how important it is to keep the middle of that pocket clean for Dak Prescott. But the Miles Sanders thing, letting Rico Dowdle go for $2.5 million, I just think the Cowboys are fumbling situations or over-investing. But what you were talking about there is interesting. That pendulum swinging back and forth from physicality to finesse. And as the defenders get smaller, all of a sudden guards and center play and running backs become a little bit more important. As, hey, we can't outrun these guys anymore. Maybe let's blow through them. And I think the pendulum swung back in favor of physicality. And, Kellen Moore was smart to take advantage of that and call the game that he did. And the Cowboys were there in 2016 with a very physical front and, running backs that were physical. And, for me, they have not made a big enough commitment back to that yet to believe that they would be in a position to set up a Saquon Barkley to have this level of success. Let's let some 2024 highlights roll here, New Bear, while we talk about this, the state of the modern running back. And are the Cowboys like 5 years behind the trend again here, not realizing how much of an opportunity it is? They've gone 2 drafts in a row, needing a running back desperately and taking a pass. What do you think?
Well, so you're leading into one of the points that I really wanted to make with this, because the only name I didn't mention on the 2024 list so far is Kyren Williams. And when you look at Kyren Williams coming out of Notre Dame, 5'9", 194, he goes to the combine. He only runs 4.65. So he falls all the way to the Rams in the 5th round. And Jaden Blue, 4.25, 4.28, 4.39 on a pulled groin. He's sub 4.3 at his pro day. He's the same size as Kyren Williams. And when you start talking about the wear and tear and the attrition, Kyren Williams, with all his touches and all his injury issues, what did the Rams do? Last year, they took Blake Corum, the kid out of Michigan, in the 3rd round. This year, they traded up in the 4th to go grab a guy they love, Jarquez Hunter. So when you're talking about what other teams do, there's really 2 ways to do it. You can say, we're locked and loaded. We're Saquon Barkley away from being untouchable. Or we're going to look at it the other way, and we're going to say, we got a really, really, really good guy, Kyren Williams. We got a guy who can play on 3 downs, Kyren Williams. Small, injury history. So we go get Corum. Corum wasn't ready as a rookie, couldn't get there. And he's still going to be counted on to push in camp, provide depth, right? Step up when his number is called if Kyren Williams goes down. But then they go get this Jarquez Hunter kid. But you're talking about 5th, third, fourth round picks, but you're drafting guys that slot into your system and that you can use to compete against each other instead of doing what the Eagles do, which is go spend bank.
I think that perfectly leads into this video that we're watching. Like, some of these plays he's facing, some serious resistance, but a lot of these he's untouched going to the house, buddy. Like, I don't think the Cowboys could have given him these kind of looks that he was so devastating on in 2024. So, like, I want to see the Cowboys invest big at running back, but I want that to be the last thing they do.
Sure.
You know? Well, you also don't want to start the clock on your runner, right? Because his rookie years, the first 3 or 4 years before he gets paid, are the absolute most valuable, and a very difficult decision is waiting for you if he is great. And I would mostly just keep churning it. I want guys on their rookie contracts. I don't want 26, 27-year-old injury risk sitting there.
Well, in the Eagles, if you look at what they did with Gainwell leaving and some of the changes that we've talked about with them on defense, but that also affects their depth chart on offense. And if Barkley were to go down, they went and grabbed A.J. Dillon. And then last year they drafted Will Shipley, who was kind of a do-everything, a lot of comparisons to Christian McCaffrey, maybe not the same type of explosive player. And not just because he's white, but the measurables and how he plays is how they look at Shipley as a developmental guy. What you're talking about, the one thing that we would be dead ass wrong if we didn't say is it's not just the offensive line. It's not just the threat of Jalen Hurts as a runner and Saquon Barkley's talent. It's A.J. Brown on one side, Devontae Smith on the other. So yeah. Lamb, Pickens again. Like, I know people are probably getting tired of me talking about how special Pickens is and how big of a difference he can make for this team, but it is unmistakable when you talk about having both sides X, Z, or if you slot them over on the same side and dictate to the defense how you're going to, control the 53 and a third. Like, this is just a different setup. And so if you're the Cowboys right now, what you're hoping is that you can get an amalgamation of things from those top three guys, because they're not counting on Phil Maffa. If Phil Maffa's playing, that means Javonte's busted. Miles Sanders just pulled his hamstring. Listen to us talk about him. And Jaden Blue can't hold on to the football and is really just, a wide receiver, slot guy playing running back. So this is a fascinating conversation to watch what happens with camp with this running back depth chart.
And you mentioned Jalen Hurts in there. I mean, that's such a massive advantage. It's like what Derrick Henry got. Derrick Henry, historic year. On most other teams last year, I feel like the narrative would have turned more to, oh, wow, Derrick Henry's getting old. But you put him in Baltimore with that offensive line and a guy like Lamar Jackson who knows how to handle the football, and everything is better. Like, the Micah Parsons story from about, mid or late season. He said, the Cowboys struggled so much this year. He was happy that Saquon Barkley or Derrick Henry didn't come to the Cowboys because they wouldn't have had much success here. Talk about shots fired at your offense. But here's Micah Parsons right here. Cowboys struggled so much, Derrick Henry wouldn't even have helped. So the players know this as well. I think it would have been engagement farming and throwing money for star players to overly invest at running back if you're not ready to win. And I'm actually kind of proud that the Cowboys didn't. They're like, we don't need to get the fans all hyped up. Let's save our salary cap space. Maybe, hopefully, 2026, 2027, there's more of an all-in move coming. But man, this could get embarrassing this year with this running back room, and it could, create a situation where the pressure on Dak is too much, even with Lamb and Pickens. So I think this is something they desperately need to get right if they really plan on contending.
One of the things that's so interesting about the Derrick Henry conversation is how Baltimore shifted from Greg Roman and really, what you saw with Colin Kaepernick and running quarterbacks and tight ends and fullbacks and different elements where you're really truly going to run the quarterback, not just have it be an element where you can threaten the defense, but you're going to run the quarterback. You're going to run in between the tackles. You're going to run Q, run, game. And what they did to that is they took a 300-pound defensive tackle and made him a fullback. Patrick Ricard's a all-pro, Pro Bowler, perennial, and that dude's a mauler. And on top of that, they said, we have a real hard time with wide receivers. Now, Zay Flowers looks like he's finally going to be the first, top pick but Rashad Bateman's still hanging out there too, and he's someone that if he can stay healthy, every year everyone talks about him being a fantasy sleeper and being, the guy who steps up for them. But what you have is you got Ronnie Stanley, who's a first-round left tackle. You got Lindenbaum, who's a first-round center. You got Rosengarten, who's a second-round right tackle. And then you got Mark Andrews, who you could argue was as good as Travis Kelce, counting stats aside, and who actually blocks. And he got older fast after that crazy injury that he had on the hip drop tackle that he came back from probably too early, wasn't really right. But as he got right, he was a touchdown every week guy. And they said, okay, if we have this problem at wide receiver, how do we double down on Andrews coming back? They went and they go get Isaiah Likely, and then they move him and they use him and they dictate to the defense in your favorite personnel 12. And that changes the way that you can use Henry, not just off of Lamar, but off of everything else around him.
It's incredible these plays Barkley is playing. Sorry, I was just getting that next video.
The wide open space is.
I mean, yeah, the space is incredible, but the other thing is he no doubt gives the Cowboys everything they really needed. Not only the running game, but the explosive plays, the third down plays. You know, the big game presence. He broke things out of nowhere in the first half multiple times in their run that totally changed the dynamic of the game. The Cowboys just had very little of what he gives, other than the CeeDee Lamb element.
Well, the thing that's so special about Saquon is that if you give him space, he's a one-cut guy. And then if he's got to go fight for it and he's got to go work for it, he's got to slide, jump cut, sift. He showed with New York that he can do those things too. He's really probably the most complete. When you talk about catching the ball and stepping up and putting his face in the fan when called upon to do, and obviously they don't ask him to do that a ton. And they've had, scat backs and third down personal protectors and different things for Jalen Hurts over time. But when you think back about how about Wow, when we talk about 3 Super Bowls in 4 years and the original triplets and Emmitt Smith, Emmitt Smith was a guy who got caught from behind. Emmitt Smith was a guy at the same time with vision and contact balance. Those are the two things you always come back to with him, that even though he wasn't Saquon Barkley per se, you knew what they were going to dictate. You knew.
Sorry, let me get this off the screen there for you. Salute to Fly Eagles Fly, by the way, for that highlight. We want to give them credit on Twitter for those cut-ups, but I'm sorry for that nauseating image on display there for a few seconds, Newberry.
what you get with a Saquon Barkley, with a Derrick Henry, even when Derrick Henry was Ryan Tannehill, and think about the supporting cast in Tennessee and what Vrabel and company were able to do in complementary football. And Ryan Tannehill is not Lamar Jackson. Ryan Tannehill is a starting quarterback in the NFL, but there's very little that you would look back and say that is special, and that is something where you say Ryan Tannehill is dictating terms like the other top quarterbacks. But then when we have Derrick Henry back there, and you're able to maximize and optimize what that quarterback can do, Derrick Henry allows you to dictate things to the defense because you have to account for him. You have to load the box on at least, first and second down, third and short, or third and medium. You're dictating to the defense just by personnel, just by that dude being one of those dudes. And
I love this theme that you're on with dictating, because the Cowboys need to get back to that in a big way. They can't go out there and feel like we can't run the ball or they're taking something away from us. If you make the Cowboys and Dak one-dimensional, are you kidding me?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that you loved about young Zeke, right, was it was 6, it was 8, it was 11, it was they were sometimes not even getting the third down.
They led the NFL in avoiding third down. Yeah,
right. And when you're able to do that, you're able to do so much off of it, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the one scary thing about talking about being multiple. The one scary thing about saying, from week to week, we're going to do different things. Like this cool guy thing that Schottenheimer's got going on. The thing that would keep him from being able to ascend and to take this thing and really take ownership of it is if they go through this whole year and they come out of it without having something to hang their hat on.
Okay, I got a couple of questions here for you, New Bear. Flush out the rest of this topic tree. We got a visitor in studio.
Speaking of hanging your hat on,
Stana, should the Cowboys... Hey, good morning. Should the Cowboys have signed Saquon Barkley last year, New Bear?
Woo, buddy. At that time, I think that the one reason that you don't is because the offensive line was not where it is potentially right now. That would be the argument against it. Without Booker, with Guyton really ultimately struggling with the respective rankings and the respective dudes and the respective traits and the way that you're looking at that thing in totality, I think if the conversation was being had this offseason and you're going to go and you're going to target a guy like Booker and you're going to build from the inside out and you're going to trade for George Pickens and you're going to fill in all these holes. Last year, they probably still had too many holes, too much other stuff going on. But the the opposite argument to that, the pro for signing Barkley, is that having him and CD at the very least gives you 2 pinnacle, premium, productive dudes who are going to allow you to, at the very least, dictate from those spots. It's not
Yeah.
it's not necessarily the Pickens and CD element.
Okay. Let me ask you this: would you rather have Pickens CD or CD Saquon if you could only get two for these Cowboys?
But I mean, are we counting Ferguson in there? And are we?
You get Ferguson and Lamb, and
Booker
you get
and
the jobbers, and you got
things being equal.
Yeah.
Well, so when you look at Philly versus Dallas, and you look at have a great day, sweetheart. When you look at Philly versus Dallas, and you look at what we were talking about not forgetting AJ Brown and Devonta Smith, they also have the really talented tight ends like Dallas Goedert and company. They have a hard time staying on the field, but they are field stretchers when they're available. So they're getting that horizontal stretch. They're getting that vertical stretch. It's not just Jason Witten going Y stick. It's Goddard going stick nod and also running deep overs. You're getting a lot more from the other guys. And I think in totality, what Philly has right now might be the most perfect collection of types, because AJ Brown is that physical bruiser at X. Devonta Smith is a guy he's a speed guy, but he plays way bigger than his size. And he's a guy who'll go fight for everything. And the two of them together play off of each other as well as any two receivers in the league that, you could argue maybe it's Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, but I think most people would pick AJ Brown and Devonta Smith over those two. You can argue they're the best duo in the league. And then when you have talent and speed down the middle at tight end and you have that line, I think right now, if the conversation 1-to-1, I would still say CD and Pickens, if healthy over 18 weeks, allow you to do so many things that the hope is you can kind of reverse engineer some combination of Javonte and Miles, whoever wins the battle, and then Jaden Blue being your third down change of pace. And then if push comes to shove and it has to be Maffa banging away on third and short or trying to set up play action on first down because Javonte and Miles are busted, then you still have the ability to have a headbanger and a dude who can really, really go, the burner, Jaden Blue.
Yeah, I think I would rather have the two wide receivers because that's more difficult to find. Like, you could mess up looking for that second wide receiver for 3 years and just blow picks. If I got the two wide receivers, I'm confident in any given offseason I can go find a difference maker running back. All I have to do is overspend or overdraft, and if I need that finishing piece, I can get it. Okay, up next here on How About Wow, I wanted to ask you this, New Bear. We go to Warren Sharp's article, and he does great work. I know we hit him over the head with some tweets and some headlines and some titles the other day, but best running back free agents 2025. Here's still who's available. Obviously, we know Zeke is not going to help. Amir Abdullah, Jeffrey Wilson, shout out Elkhart, Texas, Jamal Williams, Gus Edwards, Deontay Foreman. Is there anybody here that can help, New Bear?
I don't think there's anybody here who can help more than anybody that you already have on the roster. And this just really begs the question why they didn't look at Nick Chubb harder. It really begs the question why, especially what they spent on Williams and Sanders, that they didn't really, and they must have not liked something on the medical. They must have not liked, if you're talking about Javonte Williams MRI scans, if you're talking about Miles Sanders' track record of ostensibly being a track guy trying to play football, that when you're looking at everything that Nick Chubb has come back from and he's proven that he can do it, you're having the same conversation about a guy like J.K. Dobbins. J.K. Dobbins got paid and everyone seems to be good with him being back from the Achilles and the knee. Why would we not say the same thing about Nick Chubb?
That's a good point. You're a Notre Dame guy, aren't you?
Absolutely. I got a shamrock on once. My mother's O' Irish, so.
Okay. Looking at a mock draft, here's the question. How high would you take a Cowboy running back next year if they fail? Are you looking to make a trade? If you're 3-1, but your running game isn't going well and you beat Philly on week 1, I would trade for a running back. But assuming they don't, Jeremiah Love, Notre Dame, is the Bears were rumored to be interested in Ashton Genty. So this mock draft, ESPN, it's a 2026 mock draft, has this guy, the top running back, going middle of the first round. If that's the Cowboys picking at 17 next year, would you stand in there and take Jeremiah Love round 1?
I gotta tell you, if we're talking about them being at 17, no, because we're talking about them being stuck in the middle, and that's the worst place to be. If they're at 17, then we're talking about them not being Super Bowl ready, and we're talking about them not being in the Arch Manning sweepstakes. Like if they're in the middle of the first round again, then we're in purgatory. And the real question is, how the hell do we get out of that? And you'll
probably need corners and safeties and. Yeah, maybe another wide receiver if you're not going to sign Pickens. So there's a lot of things. Maybe a left tackle.
Let's assume that Dak is healthy and he goes for, 4,500 plus and Pickens. And we're having that conversation about we bringing him back, and is he CeeDee Lamb's running mate for the next half decade? And there's a whole bunch of other questions that I think you get to before you start talking about rookie running back that's really going to change the game. Because, when you really look at it, what you're talking about are the Ashton Genty, Bijan Robinson, Saquon Barkley, top of the pack guys. And then it really comes down to system fit. It really comes down to Sean McVay being able to go get Kyron Williams in the 5th round because he ran 4.65, but that doesn't matter the way they play. And that doesn't matter with what they're going to ask him to do. So if we get into this conversation, go in next offseason, then what it comes down to is, what did we learn about these Cowboys in 2025 and what they project to be in 2026?
I love it, New Bear. How about Wow? Again, brought to you by Elements Massage in Frisco. 2 Frisco locations. Elements, a big chain, but the 2 spots in Frisco, specifically the ones we're talking about, reach out. Tell them we sent you. 469-284-8296 on your next trip, either to North Texas, to the start of Visit the Cowboys, or maybe you live in Frisco. Elements Massage is the best. This edition of How About Wow brought to you by Elements Massage. We're back tomorrow with more gold as we continue to investigate how the Cowboys get back to the glory days. You can read all of our stuff, track our socials at howboutwow.com.